How much is the drones industry impacting your industry, your community? Well, more on that a little bit later in this episode as we visit with a very special guest, an expert on the drone industry. More on that gentleman a little bit later. Welcome to another episode of The Big Bid Theory. Bill Culhane from our studios here in Austin, Texas. Rick Jennings, our producer. We'll hear from Rick in a moment. Happy Thanksgiving week to you and yours. Not sure, of course, in the world of podcasting, not sure exactly when you're listening to this episode, but for those of you tuning in as we get ready for Thanksgiving, we hope, again, that you and yours have a very happy, healthy, safe Thanksgiving. Powered by Bid Prime. Again, this episode we're going to talk about drones, but first do want to mention the signing of the infrastructure bill. President Biden signed the bill last week, and those of you who have been listening to the show over the years in our 7th season, those of you who have been tuned into the show know that infrastructure has been a popular topic here as we've moved along throughout the year. So there's certainly some excitement here as well. Maybe the impact we had in promoting the conversation about infrastructure, maybe it was a minuscule contribution, but nonetheless, we're excited. Our guest in this episode, Paul Huish, the CEO and founder of DroneHive, based over in Utah. We're going to be chatting about one of the more interesting, an industry that continues to grow at an incredible pace. You guessed it, I just mentioned it, drones. Over recent years, a substantial number of public sector requests for drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, what have you, and it's coming from state, local, federal governments, a wide variety of activity. Rick Jennings standing by, as I mentioned, well, actually sitting. Rick, before we visit with Paul from DroneHive, big news, as I mentioned, coming out of our nation's capital. President Biden did indeed sign the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Earlier this season, we had Dr. Joe Schofer from Northwestern. He came by. Emily Feenstra from ASCE, the American Society of Civil Engineers. She spoke with us right after the Senate passed the bill a couple of months ago. Rick, this is big news.
It's very big news. Yes, we are seeing a lot of money go towards some government agencies and hubs that really do need it. We're seeing these dollars go to public health, to transportation, like higher education, lots of disadvantaged people. They're all going to get a little bit of help. So here's hoping that really does what they intend it to.
You'll hear in a moment that in our conversation with Paul, we tie in what's going on with infrastructure. And speaking of planning, Rick, any special plans for Thanksgiving?
So I have a quick funny story. There was one Thanksgiving that my family wasn't able to go to some other extended family's place to celebrate Thanksgiving. So instead, because we weren't prepared, we had Steaksgiving. So I don't know exactly what I'm doing this year yet, but I know that part of my plans will include bugging my family to see if we can do Steaksgiving again.
Sounds really nice, Rick. We're always thankful for crazy bids. What's ahead?
Well, without giving too much away, this episode's crazy bid is going to be a research opportunity over something that hopefully many of our listeners are already very familiar with. So stay tuned.
Stick around. After this quick message, Paul Huish from DroneHive discusses many things drones.
The Big Bid Theory is brought to you in part by Bid Prime. Over 11 years in changing the bid services industry, Bid Prime has become the solution for businesses serious about winning public sector business. From the premier technology in the industry to real-time bid notifications, supporting documents, and robust data tools, it's all backed by unmatched personalized customer support. Bid Prime. Start your free zero-obligation trial today. bidprime.com.
Paul Huish, who he himself is a certified remote pilot, founded DroneHive back in 2016. He has well over a decade of experience in resource management and technical contract labor and staff augmentation, most of it for multinational corporations and heavily regulated industries. At DroneHive, he's responsible for company strategy, business operations, sales, and marketing. He earned a BS degree in finance from Lehigh Go Mountain Hawks. He began his career as a financial analyst on Wall Street. With no further ado, here's my sit-down with Paul Huish.
As promised, from over in Utah, Paul Huish, by way of DroneHive, joins us on the TBBT hotline. And Paul, obviously, we thank you for sharing your expertise with our audience. And I looked at the map, Park City, Utah, down the road from Salt Lake City. How are one of the more beautiful areas in the United States? How are things going over there?
Oh, man, we are so lucky to be here in Park City. We relocated from the Bay Area in California back in 2019. I've got 2 young kids, and it's been a real blessing being able to raise them in such a beautiful mountain setting, a warm, welcome community. And I recently just joined the local Rotary here, so getting more involved, with all of the local support needs and, what's going down and with the city council and all that. So it's great here. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, you bet. We are fans of the Rotary here at the Big Bid Theory, so that's good to hear. So we have a lot of wood to chop as we go through the segment. So let's get started. I mentioned in the intro to this particular episode, and all are aware, everybody who's listening to this podcast, I know everybody knows the infrastructure bill news. President Biden signing the bill. Infrastructure bill has been in the works for years upon years. And you look in the bill, environmental and climate projects are included throughout. And I would imagine, sitting over here on this side of the desk, that drones and UAVs are going to have a role in the upcoming projects that are set to take place across the country from sea to shining sea. So with that increased investment in and focus on environmental and climate issues, Paul, how do you foresee drones being used on those projects and those initiatives?
Drones are really going to start to play a major role in so much surrounding critical infrastructure. Improvement projects, new construction, security around these critical infrastructure assets across the board. And then, of course, monitoring environmental sustainability projects, helping with, wildland fire prevention. FEMA has put aside a significant amount of funds for disaster recovery relief, which drones will be a part of, and delivering medicine, delivering water, monitoring, the citizens who may be trapped on roofs, doing inspections of critical infrastructure damaged by these storms. So, we're just barely scratching the surface, and we've seen what these can do. We're perfecting the operation. We're perfecting the technology. Now it's all about adoption and integrating them into all of these operations, getting the most use out of them. And, ultimately, it's drones for good. These tools are going to help with so many projects, with data collection and intelligence, communication, ultimately just improving society across the board.
Yeah, just there, Paul, I heard you, and the audience clearly heard you go through a number of interesting industries. And when you and I visited, I guess it was last week, I mentioned to you that a few years ago we had Marty Rogers, the director of Assure over at Mississippi State. And Marty came on, and I'll be honest, a few years ago, I didn't know as much about drones as I do now. And Marty mentioned some of the applications for drones. And I remember Marty bringing up security specifically, how drones could be leveraged in that arena. And so with security continuing to be a growing priority for both the public and private sector, right? It doesn't really matter, but how can drones be used to augment security in particular?
Great. Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the fact that you and the audience have been more educated around drones over the past couple of years when you last talked to Marty on this podcast. And we're seeing that across the board. We have less people asking questions, and even when we're flying in public arenas, less people being concerned about privacy and all those things. So in general, I think the industry has done a really good job of educating the general public. But getting back to your question about security, there's a lot that can be done, but I don't want to overstate the amount of use that they're getting because there is still a lot of limitations. And, when you think about drones and when they first were coming into the fold, they were doing a lot of monitoring of bad actors, Taliban, Al Qaeda, ISIS, and those were the large military UAVs. We don't really get involved in that arena, but we are getting involved in security with small UAS. And so there's a couple of options and kind of ways that is being done right now with different players in the industry. And, I don't want to name any one particular firm, but there are a handful of companies that are focused on different approaches. One approach is with a drone in a box. This is a unit that is pretty much fully automated. It lives inside a box placed at the facility, at the site, and the drone is programmed to fly kind of a perimeter scanning mission. The box opens up, the drone takes off, flies its surveillance mission, and then returns to the box where it again can transfer the data and get recharged, get ready for the next mission. Now, you could have multiple of these at a very large facility, one at a medium-sized facility, and there are challenges there around the regulations because we're still not allowed to fly beyond visual line of sight without special approvals. Those approvals are being granted by the FAA, but by and large, you do need to have a certified pilot on site at all times, even with the beyond visual line of sight requirements. But, I'm not an expert on that, so I won't get too far into it. But there's also kind of more manual security being done. We work with a company that's actually in the cannabis industry. They were getting some theft occurring, and they didn't want to just monitor. They wanted to identify the actual thieves, by taking pictures of license plates, what have you, of people who had entered and trespassed into their property. And then, you hear about drones being used to monitor things like the Super Bowl. And those may be tethered drones. Tethered drones means that they're flying, but they are actually still connected to the ground with, connectivity communication technology that allows them to stay in the air in perpetuity because the power cord and the power source is not a battery at this point. It's directly connected to a very large power source on the ground. And so they can fly for much longer than the drones that are battery powered. They used that at the Super Bowl in Atlanta a couple of years ago, and I know that they continue to do so for all kinds of major sporting events across the world. And then the last topic I wanted to talk about was counter UAS. This is a whole industry in itself because while drones should be used for good and mostly are, there is a lot of, again, bad actors who are using drones for nefarious activities. And, it could be a real problem. I know that there was a strange incident in the Southwest where a drone was flying around a nuclear power plant. That could really be catastrophic. So all of these critical infrastructure, power plants, and other sensitive facilities are taking a look at what other types of solutions are out there for counter UAS operations, whether jamming it, taking it down, or even just simply identifying. So those are kind of the main focuses right now in the security arena. And I know people are thinking of new things all the time, and it'll probably continue to evolve. But in addition, it needs to have more approvals and an authorization from the FAA to do more cool things that help us be safer as a society.
In one of our production conversations, I'll call it, I mentioned to you how I came across an article in which the governor of New York was talking about drones, and the topic of the FAA's UAS regulations part 107 came up. And let me just add this. We were just talking about security, but when I think about an operator needing a wider than the norm scope of operations, I think of industries like agriculture where drones can be used, forestry where drones can be used. So that's kind of a very open-ended, or it's going to be an open-ended question to you, Paul, on can you kind of cover some of the restrictions that maybe some in our audience aren't aware of? And what is your opinion on whether those current restrictions are too restrictive?
Of course. Yes, I'm happy to. I hate to admit that the U.S. overall drone services industry is not the leader in the globe. And I don't think we really ever were. We've been constrained by the federal government, and really not about their acceptance of the technology, but more about the speed at which they have integrated us into the national airspace. And so from that came 14 CFR Part 107, which basically oversees and controls the use of commercial drones in the national airspace, requires all drone pilots to have a special airman certificate specific to small UAS. And, there's some restrictions there that, to me seem common, but we're not allowed to fly above 400 feet. That's the airspace above that is reserved for commercial airliners and manned aircraft. We can get approval to go above 400 feet, but it has to be, of something that we are inspecting. So if we had a building, let's say, we're working on the Prudential Center right now in downtown Boston. This is an active project for DroneHive. They are remodeling the top 2 stories. It used to be a restaurant, and now they're going to make it an experience for the tourists. It's one of the largest buildings in Boston. It's also not too far from the airport. So not only did we have to get special approval to fly close to the airport, we also had to get special approval to fly above 400 feet in order to complete what we need to be doing for the inspection of this construction work. That's part of it. The other big thing is you can't fly beyond visual line of sight, meaning you need to have somebody with eyes on the drone at all times unless you get a waiver. So that's going to limit things like drone delivery. That's going to limit things like flying on the other side of a building, flying on the other side of a mountaintop, and you're right, they're being used for forestry. So what if you're in the forest and you're trying to fly a drone above you in the canopy, but you can't see the drone through the canopy? Where does that fall as far as compliance goes? That's a little bit of a gray area, but I think the overall point I'm trying to make is that the FAA needs to really try to get more serious and more swift with the integration of drones into the national airspace, because ultimately, being able to deliver rapid tests for COVID testing via drone from a Walmart, that's a great service that's very relevant for today, and it's quite limited. There are companies that do have waivers to do beyond visual line of sight, and we are actually helping to test with telecom companies flying drones over their cellular network and then taking that data about the communication and the stability of that communication of the drone to make a use case and a data set for review by the FAA to say, yes, drones can safely fly over cellular networks, meaning they can safely fly very far distance while maintaining communication and beyond visual line of sight. And hopefully that'll pave the way for things like urban air mobility, urban taxis, all of these things, these automated taxis that will come. It's taking the FAA a long time to figure out UTM, remote identification. So basically like a license plate or a tail number for a drone, and how that's all going to work, who's going to manage it so that we can be fully integrated into the national airspace. And I think that most of my industry cohorts would agree that it's taking much longer than anybody ever expected.
Sitting here on the sidelines, it will be interesting to see how that plays out. And I know some in our audience, their ears perked up a little bit when you mentioned urban air mobility. We had Mike Dickin from Armstrong Consultants, airport management guru, was on our most recent episode. And Mike talked about how it's becoming a busier airspace, and he kind of profiled urban air mobility. So it is interesting, and I appreciate your thoughts there, Paul. And we have so many people listening to our show who are in the world of construction. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, because some don't know, there are going to be billions of dollars invested in construction projects coming from the infrastructure bill. So how is that going to impact the drones industry? How is and or will the construction industry make use of drones?
Well, I hope that it becomes adopted for every construction site on all projects nationwide of significant value. Maybe not residential homes, but maybe a residential home development. I already told you about the project we're doing at the Prudential Center. We do fly for forward-thinking construction companies and typically working with their VDC and BIM departments. And they're creating, digital twins of their projects so that they can share that with the stakeholders, the landowner, the developer, the general contractor, who's providing updates to those people saying, look, this is what was done today. We have some projects where we've flown every single day. We fly the development of the Walmart headquarters in Bentonville. They're building a new campus there. We fly that every day. And that gets uploaded and shared with everybody so they can see exactly what has happened just in that day's construction. We do the same for solar farm development. Those we fly daily. Again, are we on track? Because these have tight deadlines and there's so much money behind it that if they fall behind, they'll hire more contractors and subcontractors to make sure they finish on time. So they're monitoring that daily. We're flying Microsoft in Redmond, Washington once a week. We've flown a number of projects for Google and Facebook, on a weekly basis. Again, that's construction progress monitoring. But there are other uses also. We do exploratory and discovery flights for clients who are looking at raw land and trying to determine whether or not that's going to be something that they want to acquire and potentially build an asset on. We're doing modeling with drones. So creating topographical models that will help the dirt moving companies with cut fill analysis. So once they're about ready to break ground and they need the earth to be in a certain, plateau or grade, working with that. Well, and then what about, kind of the environmental constraints around construction? Are we putting in the necessary easements? Are we putting in the necessary water retention, water containment? I don't know what those would be called, developments or little projects, So, and then all the way to the end, after the project is completed, they send us out and we create a set of pretty pictures for the marketing team. They put those in a book of like all their historical projects. And if it's not leased out or doesn't have a tenant quite yet, they use it to attract tenants. So throughout all stages of the construction life cycle, we're using aerial data collection and drone technology to improve the efficiency of these projects, to improve the insight of what's going on, and also to cut down on rework, right? They're looking at this and saying, was that done the way it was supposed to be done? The architect and the design teams, and comparing that digital twin that we create with what was envisioned and what was planned. So they can catch things, the day it happens when it's wrong versus maybe a week or two down the line when it's going to be a much more expensive problem to fix. So the infrastructure bill should bring more work to the construction industry, which I in turn hope brings more work to the drone services industry.
As we get ready to go to 2022, as you look back at 2016, is drones an easier sell today than it was 5.5, 6 years ago? I think I know the answer.
There's two aspects to that answer, and that are kind of impacting the ease of the sale or the acceptance, right? The technology has improved, and as I mentioned earlier, the general public is better educated about drones and their capabilities and drones for good. So that has made the conversation a lot more interesting, a lot more easy to engage. However, it's also a lot more competitive. There are so many people who have entered into this marketplace, even just now, and there's so much competition on the analytics side and the reporting side and the data management side. DroneHive, we really focus on the execution, the aerial operation itself, the scalability, the sustainability of aerial data collection throughout North America. And, we've been pulled internationally now, so we're going global. But it is quite competitive. And so we feel lucky that we got involved when we did way back in January of 2016. And we've got so much experience, and maybe we were a little bit early, and those were very hard clients to obtain in the early days. But we've learned so much, and the technology has come so far that, I think 2022, 2023, these are the years of mass adoption. So now it's all about land grab. The construction companies who haven't been using drones, they're probably about ready. And, soon enough, I do believe that all of these constructions will be using drones. And so it's up to us to impress them with our experience, our skill set, our capability, our reach, our technology, and try to try to win as many clients as we can in the next couple of years, because they should be years of explosive growth.
Yeah, word is out. There's no doubt about it. And just in our day jobs, looking at the public sector, state, local, federal agencies are all getting into the game when it comes to drones. And Paula, as you've been conversing with us throughout our conversation, you've been weaving in the pronoun we. Tell us more about DroneHive. Who are you folks? And you've done a pretty darn good job of, I think, giving us a glimpse at what you do at DroneHive. But if you could kind of give us that elevator pitch.
Yeah, of course. Well, we're experts in aerial data collection, and we help our clients make better business decisions through aerial intelligence from our data sets. So we've touched upon a lot of those use cases already, but we haven't touched upon how we do that. Well, we have created a network of almost 1,800 drone pilots throughout North America and a few internationally as we begin to go global. And in order for our support and our services to be scalable, which is really what we're trying to achieve for our clients, and sustainable, we need to rely on local resources. We can't be spending money on travel expenses and hotels and gas. And we want our pilots to be happy, sleeping at their own bed at night, and having, again, sustainable operations means, they're happy and they're healthy and they're comfortable and being with their family and all of those things. So our goal is to help large corporations and businesses with dispersed assets geographically, across many regions, to scale data collection for their inspections, for their projects, for their digital twins, for the properties they're insuring, And so that's who we are. We are truly an international drone service provider with the ability to deploy local resources almost anywhere within, a 2 to 3 hour drive. So our network really reflects the overall population of the U.S. There are areas where there's just not a lot of people. So sometimes we do have to send somebody 3 or 4 hours to go inspect a wind turbine or to fly a cornfield, But that's the challenges that we're here to solve is how do we effectively, efficiently, at a reasonable cost, go out and collect the data that is valuable and meaningful for our clients and their business operations.
Data and information, I'm on record, data and information are powerful, no doubt about it. And incidentally, anybody who just heard Paul go through the background on DroneHive, we'll include a link to DroneHive's website in the description of the episode, and we'll also include Paul's bio as well. Well, Paul, on behalf of our audience, we so much appreciate, and our team, we so much appreciate you visiting with us. I could talk about drones for a long time, even though I'm not much more qualified than the fact that maybe I can spell drone. But it's so interesting to me. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours and everybody there at DroneHive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill. Happy Thanksgiving to you too. And hopefully you'll see a drone or two flying around and somebody enjoying their holiday, taking some family photos from the air.
Rick, it's that time of year. Hard to believe, but we're on the final stretch of season 7. After this masterpiece, as a matter of fact, one more episode remaining this season. Rick, it's time for Crazy Bids. Take it away.
My favorite section of the podcast. Okay, so this episode's Crazy Bid comes from the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine based over in good old Washington, D.C. So this business opportunity is titled Telecommuting, Remote Work, and Hybrid Schedules, managing the shift to a flexible work future. So, of course, myself, us here at Bid Prime, and lots of other companies all around the globe have shifted to a more flexible work schedule, and that anyone who can work from home, of course, was certainly encouraged to, and definitely we've done our part to do that as well over here. But yeah, So the National Academies over here are looking for researchers to come in and help identify a couple of key points for what has changed within transit agencies and DOTs through here in the U.S. So what their objectives are is to, one, conduct a rapid review of the recent experience of state DOTs in increased use of flexible work environments like working from home, and then also to synthesize the recent experience to identify successful practices and key considerations, and then also to develop a template for managers and employees to assess their suitability for a flexible work environment. So departments of transportation, of course, they need to practice their social distancing as well and working from home as best they can. For lots of us, that was a little bit more difficult than some of the others, but they want to, as we move into this new future and this new normal that we're going to basically experience over the next couple of months or however long, the departments of transportation need to find out, and they need your help understanding if their team is best suited to do so, and how to identify that, pros and cons of moving over to that just indefinitely. Lots of different things you can figure out here. So it seemed pretty interesting that this was something that has stood out to me whenever I was looking for a couple of bids, because you wouldn't think about it, but even people on the transportation board, I mean, everyone needs to move to that. Everyone needed to move to that remote state of work as best they could. So that was something that was really neat to see. And if you're able to conduct research for DOTs and transit agencies, and that is this episode's crazy bid that you can win.
Again, many, many thanks for tuning in, sharing, and if you're kind enough to download and follow the Big Bid Theory, we do appreciate you. And as always like to mention how much we appreciate the emails as well. You can email me directly at bcolhane@bidprime.com. And please give us a follow on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is The Big Bid Theory. And also, if you want to give me a follow, my personal Twitter is contract_hunter. That's contract, the little underscore line hunter. And we are also on Facebook as well. Powered by Bid Prime. That's going to do it for this episode of the Big Bid Theory. Again, many thanks to Paul Huish from DroneHive. You heard Paul say it. If you're out there Thanksgiving, look up. Might see a drone or two taking some images. Also, many thanks to our entire team. And, of course, looking through the glass here, Rick Jennings, for producing this episode as well. Until next time, this is Bill Colhane. Go Gunners, Barracudas, Tigers, Bobcats, and Cubs, and we wish you all the best in growing your business.
Powered by Bid Prime, we thank you for tuning in to the Big Bid Theory. From Austin, Texas, the show is produced by Bill Colhane and Jim Ward. Producer and engineer is Rick Jennings. You can find other episodes of the show on platforms such as iHeart, iTunes, Spreaker, Google Play, Stitcher, among others. As always, thank you for downloading and sharing the podcast.
We're having so much fun.